My privilege to welcome today's panelists, each of who I've come to know as contributors to our summer special feature. And I believe, myself included, we're all in our late 20s, early 30s, so hopefully quite nice for a session all on youth. So to kick us off, we have Kelvin Mully, who's the founder and CEO of the Pan-African Network for Climate Action, or PAMCA. They're based in Kenya. Kelvin has extensive experience in policy advocacy, international development, and grassroots experience in programs spanning youth employment to natural resource management. Also joining us is Andrea Chiara Brancale, the Programs and Internationals Networks and Communications Officer at Asfero, the Italian Association of Foundations and Philanthropic Organizations. Andrea's been at the forefront of a really landmark sort of future chair program, which I'm sure they'll speak about more as we get along. And that's really been designed to spark intergenerational dialogue within and between organizations. And last but not least, I'm pleased to introduce Philip Adegoza, the PAMFCA country lead in Ghana. Philip is driving efforts to digitalize Africa's agricultural ecosystems, linking finance, global markets, agri-intelligence, with farmers and cooperatives on the ground. So a great lineup. Welcome everyone. I'm really glad to have you all here. And to start us off, we're going to go right in. I think I wanted to invite each of you to sort of briefly introduce yourselves, but more so I'm quite interested to share how each of you as a young person first encountered the world of philanthropy, because it's, as we all know, it's traditionally not a space that's been dominated by young voices and might be kind of hard to get involved in the first instance. Andrea, I might come to you first, then let's go Kelvin to follow and Philip after. So Andrea, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Kate. And first of all, thank you so much for inviting us. And most importantly, thank you very much for keeping this conversation up on a topic that is so important and so crucial at the moment. As far as I'm concerned, I'm Andrea, and I'm based in Italy, where I'm part of that 15% of the population that goes between 15 and 29 years old, because as you might know, we're the second oldest country in the world. In Italy, as you just said, I work for Asifero, that is the National Association of Foundations and Philanthropic Organizations, where I do lead the Future Chair initiative, which I will tell you a little bit in a while. I first encountered philanthropy recently, indeed, almost 3 years ago, after I finished my master's, which was the first ever master in philanthropy in Italy. And indeed, I did that because even though as many young professionals in Italy, I was working in the civil society organizations, I had no idea about philanthropy and indeed wanted to learn more. And while I was in the master, I actually came across Asifero, who was looking for young people to co-create the Future Chair initiative and was actually willing to pay us. So I was double surprised by that. And that's how I started. And now I'm the super proud coordinator of the initiative.
Wonderful, thank you. And Kelvin, we'll come to you next. If you're there, Kelvin. If not, in fact, let's go straight to Philip then. We can come back.
Okay, so thank you.
No, I'm here.
Calvin, go ahead.
Over to you, Kelvin.
Thank you very much, Kate, and also building up on what Anna shared. So my name is Kevin Muli, and I'm the CEO of Pan-African Network for Climate Action, which is a youth-led organization advancing climate action, sustainability, and also community resilience across Africa. Therefore, my journey into philanthropy and grant making began as a young community volunteer, where I was able to witness how strategic funding could be able to transform the local ideas into sustainable solution. And over time, as I progressed in leading youth and also climate initiatives, I was able to recognize that philanthropy is not just about providing financial resources, but it's also about investing in young people, fostering innovation, and also enabling communities to be able to lead their own development. And since then, I can tell you I've worked with a lot of organization, with a lot of partners to be able to mobilize partnerships and also resources that empower young people to be able to drive meaningful and also social environmental change, which is the core mandate of what I do. And in a nutshell, that's what my journey has been through philanthropy and grant-making. And back to you, Kate.
Great, thank you. And Philip, just bring us home. You're on mute, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Kate. My name is Philip Adagonza, the country led for Panka. I'm an entrepreneur and an innovator, so I run my own business as well, chain of business that is fighting against food insecurity and malnutrition, as well as post-harvest losses, which is a problem in Africa as a whole. We lose almost 6 billion, $48 billion a year due to post-harvest losses. So currently, that's what I'm working to address, as well as climate change fight. So I came across philanthropy when I was in tertiary, where we used to go out to support entrepreneurs, and I realized that the topic is about just um, it's about just about money. It's also about mentoring youth, investing in them to be able to stand and work for things that will help shape their economy or their environment. So that was the first time I hear about philanthropy, and I got myself involved. So through that, I got to see that before I can solve any problem, I should always think about what people go through. It also involves philanthropic services like the post-harvest losses that I'm currently working on. People lose a lot of money because after harvest they are not able to get farmers, and they are not going to get buyers and all kind of things. Then climate change where people are not able to yield enough crops because the climate is not working for in their favor. So, which is what we are doing with Banker in Africa, in Ghana here. So that was the first time I got to know, and since then I got myself involved, and we are doing an amazing job, and we are also mentoring the youth. Currently, I've mentored about almost 100 youth in this space, which is helping to shape their economic and socio-economic factors that will help mentor them and also become responsible citizens. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. And I definitely agree. It's that thing of, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people, the first thought when they think of philanthropy is money, and there is so much beyond that, and I'm sure we'll unpack it. I think maybe we could start, why don't we come back to you, Kelvin? Perhaps you could share a little bit more about why you started Pamphco, but more specifically, I'd love you to explain why you chose to build it around young people specifically.
Thank you, Kate, for that beautiful question. My journey as Pan-African Network for Climate Action has been incredibly brief. It began with a very simple but deeply personal realization that despite being the generation that will live the longest, as young people, the consequences of climate change, in particular, young people are rarely trusted to shape the solutions, and therefore, I often I was often invited to conversation as a participant, but very seldomly as decision makers, innovators, or even eco partners. So growing up in Kenya, I was able to witness firsthand impacts of climate change, how it was affecting communities, farmers struggling with unpredictable rainfall trends, flood destroying livelihoods, especially that's very common here in Kenya, drought, threatening food security, which is a very big, actually we call it the backbone of our economy, and young people were continuously and increasingly anxious about their future. Yet, whenever climate solutions were discussed, the voices of the most affected and most vulnerable people were missing from the table. And therefore, that disconnect really inspired me to establish Pan-African Network, not simply as another youth organization, but as a platform where young Africans could be able to lead, innovate and also influence policy rather than, wait for the permit to act. And from the beginning of this journey, I believe that Africa's greatest resource is not only its natural capital but also in its young people, because young people comprise over 60% of the population, and therefore Africa, being the youngest continent in the world, with more than 60% of the population at the age of 25, I genuinely felt that we needed to solve the challenges related to these problems, and therefore it really inspired me to invest in young people, which I didn't want to make it optional, and it was one of the smartest and the most rightful steps and long-term investments that we've made so far. And building Pan-African Network for Climate Action around young people was therefore a very deliberate decision, because young people understand the realities of their communities, because they live them every day. They are highly adaptable, digitally connected, and very proactive, and also very willing to to experiment with new ideas, and they are not constrained by what we call the mindset of this is how it has always been done, but instead shaping conversation of how can we do it better. Therefore, one as I sum up, one of the examples that clearly demonstrates you know the resilience of these young people, and is the work we do through our one of our initiatives called the Africa Climate Leadership Academy, where we realized that many young Africans really wanted to contribute to climate action but lacked the access to affordable and also high quality learning opportunities. Rather than waiting for these external solutions from other continents, we built a platform that equips young people and shapes them with practical knowledge, leadership skills, and also opportunities to be able to engage in policy and also community action. And the idea was to not simply to educate, but also to create a generation of climate leaders capable of influencing decisions in their own countries. And also, we have a very noble program, and actually, I'm very happy to see some of the fellows here. We have the Guardians of the Earth Fellowship Program, which is also an initiative of the Pan African Network, and that's shaping the African narrative and equipping the next leaders. And these experiences have reinforced one important lesson: that youth-led organizations are often incredible, and we've been able to identify problems quickly, uh, test ideas rapidly, and also adapt to when something is not working. And therefore, this has brought to me what I believe philanthropy can learn from youth-led movements. First, I'll name three of them very quickly. First is that philanthropy needs to shift from funding projects to trusting people. Too often, young people and young leaders receive very small, highly restricted, and very technical grants with extensive reporting requirements, but little flexibility given to the youth. Yet, a lot of meaningful social change requires trust. So, when philanthropy invests in young people, young leaders, with flexible long-term impact and support, it enables them to respond to emerging challenges, innovate, and also build sustainable solutions rather than short-lived projects. Secondly, philanthropy should recognize that lived experiences is a form of expertise. Therefore, young people are often closest to the issues they seek to solve, whether it is climate adaptation, unemployment problems, education, digital inclusion. Their proximity to communities allows them to design solutions that are more relevant, inclusive, and also responsive. Thirdly, is that philanthropy can also embrace digital strengths of this generation. Today's young people are digital natives. We are in a techno. We have youth that are techno serve, 21st century, digitally exposed. Therefore, they naturally leverage AI, artificial intelligence, data, social media, digital storytelling, and technology to tell their stories. And finally, as I conclude, is that philanthropy should redefine success, because success should not only be measured by a number of activities completed or reports submitted, it should also be measured by the strength of local leadership that young people portray, that is developed, the partnerships also that are built,
Oh, I think we might have lost Kelvin there. Are you still with us, Kelvin? I think we might have lost him. Okay, in which case, I mean, also what a point to end on in terms of absolutely the whole evaluation, monitoring, measurement system affects so many different parts, not just youth engagement, but right across representation, philanthropy. So yeah, lots there that again we can come back to this digital native part as well. I also think it's fantastic in a way that we have, obviously, Calvin there was talking about having Africa being the youngest continent, and then Andrea, you talking about being from one of the oldest, like the population's on the oldest, and maybe on that we'll come to you now, Andrea, because you have quite a unique experience of, I guess, being a young person in what we call institutional philanthropy. I'd love to hear a little bit about what experiences you've had in that position, maybe some of the motivations for working in it, rewards, challenges, like associated, I guess, with your specific model and in your specific context.
Yes, thank you very much, Kate, for the question, and thank you, Kelvin, for what you shared, which was already very much enlightening. So as far as our experience at Future Chair goes, Future Chair was born both from a contradiction and from a clear statement of the role that Asifero wanted to play in the philanthropic, institutional philanthropic sector, as you were mentioning, Kate. So the contradiction was, in fact, that many of the foundations we do work with have supporting young people as one of the main aims, but on the other side, none of them or very few of them have anything to say as active subjects of the initiative. So they're always placed in the role of beneficiary and almost never as active actors that can actually shape change or seen as equal partners. And this was actually reflected in the data of the survey that we conducted in 2019 that led us to the creation of Future Chair, which was showing us that almost 95% of the board of directors of the foundations we were working for had an average age that was around 50 years old, and only 32% of them had staff even that was under 35. So seeing that, Asifero has always perceived herself being a philanthropy infrastructure organization as a system actor. So our idea is not only to support our funders and the members of the network, but indeed to bring emerging questions to the table and actually enrich the perspective and try and catalyze sectoral and structural change. So Future Chair was indeed born with that intention. Now that I've said so many times Future Chair, I might tell you what it is. So Future Chair is a shared commitment that today brings about 70 funders on board. And the idea is to bring foundation and philanthropic organization and foster meaningful participation of youth in the philanthropic decision making. This entails, as Kelvin was sharing very, very richfully, a cultural shift, because it entails a shift from seeing young people as objects, so as something that is passive and just a beneficiary, to moving to seeing young people as subjects, so active actors of change. So to do that, we are not providing a one-size-fits-all answer, because it doesn't make any sense to do that, but we're asking the difficult question and indeed supporting the foundations in the process to open conversation on long-term thinking, on intergenerational dialogue, and on actually how young people are involved in the work. And we're doing that, supporting funders with principle, practical tools, peer learning, and spaces for reflection and debate. So for now, Future Chair was launched in 2023. So when Asifero turned 20, we wanted to make a commitment to the future rather than celebrating the past. 3 years on, we're seeing growing engagement, which is great. We're seeing that 86% of the funders that have engaged with us, with the Future Chair, actually are now showing a higher level of engagement with youth participation. And indeed, it is great to see that around the sector, just as what was shared before me, we're seeing a lot of examples coming up of youth leadership. So for example, we're seeing youth-led bread making as, for the youth banks that were created from the National Network for Local Philanthropy in Ukraine. We're seeing co-designing processes and community-based development as the community foundations in Naples of San Gennaro and in Sicily of Agrigento Trapani were doing. We're seeing young advisory boards as an entry point to the decision-making parts, as Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation in Portugal did and Fondazione Compagnia di San Paolo in Italy. And finally, we're also seeing young people in boards. So for example, one example is the Intergenerational Board or Learning for Wellbeing Foundation. On the other side, these are great examples of bettering practices that we're seeing, but indeed we're seeing persistent challenges. So for the most part, as Kelvin was sharing, it is very much about short period and project-based, and most importantly, it is very often at the level of consultation. So structural involvement is still very uneven. And this is about shifting how participation is structurally designed and is way beyond youth, because indeed any kind of participation, if it's not diverse, it's just reinforcing the existing inequalities. If it's not resourced, then it is extractive. And if it is just based on the issue that you are supposed to be concerned of, then we're again marginalized communities into the spots in which we think they can talk about. And finally, with young people, if we stay at the level of consultation, it's also about the fact that if we look at the Laura Lundi model, for example, about youth participation, it is important to give young people space, and it's important to give them voice, but then you should also give them audience. So listen to them and actually give them influence. So what they're saying is actually turning into something. So follow up and follow through what young people have shared. So for us to move beyond this, it is actually about thinking more long-term and having a long-term commitment. It is about fair compensation, and it is about diversity and also resourcing the skills that are needed. These are just parts of the enabling conditions that can actually make meaningful participation of youth in institutional philanthropy possible. And this is also about the fact that Kelvin was also mentioning that this is about power, and is about how much philanthropy is willing to shift the power towards those that own that future as a right. So talking about our own future, we're willing to not really scale Future Chair because it's not really about that, but we would really like to point the attention on the responsibility of philanthropy and the responsibility that it has towards contributing to building a just, equal, and plural society that centers people and planet, and that is doing this in the interest of future generation. So this is about the role that philanthropy wants to play, and is also very much about the narratives that it reproduces and the voices that it's choosing to amplify. So young people are always portrayed, very much, not always, but frequently portrayed in narratives of need, narratives of vulnerability, and very much spoken about rather than listened to. So our idea is to keep on investing very much on narrative change as the means and driver for cultural change, so that young people are finally recognized, not simply for their challenges, but for the knowledge that they hold, for the lived experience that was mentioned before, for the agency that they exercise, and especially for the role that they are already playing in social change. So Future Chair is not really a model for Astifero to own, but a conversation that we would like to keep on bringing to the table of philanthropy in Italy and beyond. And for that, we're very thankful to Alliance for opening up today and for the special feature that you created. So really, if I can close with an invite with everyone is listening, if anything that I said resonated with you, please take it, adapt it, and make it yours.
Nice words to end on there. And it is this complete paradox where you have so many foundations saying that one of their primary purposes is to sort of like help the next generation and help youth. And if you look at who's in their staff, their literal staff, that's the representation's not there. I also, Andrea, maybe while I have you, and this is has just come to me now, you said that you did one of the first masters in philanthropy. Is that right in Europe? I wonder, do you think there should be more academic like masters in philanthropy, or do you think that's kind of missing like to encourage young people into the conversation and into these rooms and to get them perhaps hireable or employable from people? Or do you think actually academia is completely the wrong way? We should be thinking far more grassroots with this.
So that is a very good question. So on one side, I would say that we do really need much more in institutions working on learning and teaching about philanthropy, because really the level of professionalization of philanthropy in Italy is very low. It is not even perceived, as you were saying, as a potential career to have. No one knows anything about it, and it's very much in the bottoms and hidden. So I would say that we really need to work on the levels of professionals and what they know, how much, because this is also about how much agency you have, because if you know about something, you can actually try and change it. So it should really, or contribute to it. So it should really be something that we see in it, because now it's something that we're really missing in the Italian and European sector. I would say the levels of instructions on philanthropy is very low. And on the other side, I wouldn't say that this is the only solution to bring it into academia and institutions, because again, then we will have a level of access to it, which is a question at the point. But also when we're engaging with young people, what we're seeing really is the need, indeed, as you're saying, to really give them the skills and the tools to contribute, because otherwise it's just putting someone there, not giving them the tools to contribute, not teaching them what's the environment in which you're in, but not in a way in which this is how it works, this is how you should do it, but it has worked this way until now, and this is the way we contribute, and this is the way we work, but you can try and come in. Because what we're seeing very much is that the mentorship, as was said before, the levels are very low, even when young people are inserted into those boards or those organism that they're creating. Then if you're not accompanying young people, but not in a patronizing way, but really as a tool to contribute meaningfully, then we're missing something. So I would say not only academia, we do need academia to open a conversation and to understand that working in philanthropy is indeed a job, and it's not voluntary thing, or is not about, oh, you have the money and you can do it, or if you don't, you just enter and you learn from there. But on the other side, really working with young people and meet them where they are, because what we're seeing very much is also that, as you were mentioning, a lot of young people are at grassroots level and they know very much about how decision making works, but in a different way, which is not recognizable with a very conservative philanthropy, which, for example, we do have in Italy.
Thanks, Andrea. It's interesting to hear your thoughts. Philip, I want to come to you now. You work very closely with communities on the ground, and I think I wanted to hear if you had ever faced any stigma, I guess, related to being a young leader in that landscape, maybe from funders, maybe from community members. It's something that's come up quite a bit in various forms in lots of the magazine articles in this special feature. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to explore that question with you.
Okay, so thank you for the question. Yes, so I have encountered with a lot of community that always question my credibility, because at the time I was very young, 15 years back. They were like, ah, we've been doing farming for almost 40 years. What do you know? That you want us to stop burning our organic waste. We have to follow whatever that you think you have learned. You just went to school and you think the education that you had is enough to change whatever that we have been doing for ages. So they were like, oh, your results will not work. So what I learned from that stigma was that instead of me trying to convince them, it would be better I show them results. So I stopped worrying them with, oh, let's do this, let's farm this way. No, I started using my own methods. That is, I introduced my own regenerative agriculture processes, started my own compost process where I turn the organic waste into fertilizer, where I don't need to spend more money on fertilizer, chemical-based fertilizer. So I started doing that, doing my own biochar, where instead of you burning the waste, I will use it to preserve the land to make it fertile. So when my first year, that was in 2016, So when I started, my harvest and where one of my partner who we just wanted to experiment, where we didn't do the whatever processes that I was doing, my own was much higher by 15, I think 30% higher yield than what they had. So then that they begin to ask me, so what did I do? What are the processes that I did? And I started getting more people coming on board, those who have even who were discrediting me that your process will not work, you are just lazy. Instead of you to cut trees and plant, you are rather planting while trees are on. And I say, yes, we need to protect the trees where the climate is also being preserved. We need to safeguard our land, the planet, and all kind of things. So as time progresses, people realize that what I'm saying is true, and that up to date their yield are being increased by almost 40 to 50% because they instead of them to do bush burning and all that, they have stopped, which is always depleting the nutrients in the soil. So they have stopped. When it get to harvesting, they will rather harvest, preserve the land, ensure that people are not burning the land, people are not cutting trees. And they also do farm bells so that even if someone do burn the bush at far away and it will not get to their farm. So this process has helped. And one thing I learned is that as youth, instead of you to always try to explain to people what you can do, show them what you have achieved. And the results will always convince people more than you just going to say, oh, I have this nice process or I've learned this, let's practice it. It doesn't work because I have lived it and I see that, yes, people didn't believe it, but now they have seen that, yes, what I'm saying is true. Then there was a time I also tried to convince some funders who could finance my business because I thought since I started getting more yield, I could get some access to funding so that I can expand my farm. But when I went, they said, no, when the rain stop, how will you get the yield that you are promising to pay back the money? Then I said, no problem. So I took them to the farm. They had a look. Then I told them that when I'm about to harvest, I will invite them to come to the farm to see whatever yield I'm going to harvest from the farm so that they will see whatever process that I'm trying to tell them or convince them it is workable. So they did, took pictures, saw whatever process that I'm going through. Then when we were harvesting, they came and they saw that yes, they don't need nobody to tell them that whatever process I'm implying on my farm is working. So they came on board and started giving me access to funding, and that really helped. And up to date, I'm still benefiting from their support. Sometimes when they have any program or any money that they can support me, they will easily call me. So these processes are things that are really happening. If you try to convince people, like Calvin said, because it's a problem in Africa. If you instead of you to convince, just try and show them the result. Let them see that yes, this is doable, this is achievable. Whatever that you plan, until people get to begin to yield results from it, they will trust it. Because especially when you are young, they will just look at your age and say, you what do you know? When we've been doing this for ages, what at all do you know? Some will even begin to question your credibility and say that the books that you went to learn, it is making you go mad. Somebody ever told me that, and I was like, hey, if I'm mad, just wait and see what will come out of it. So stigma in climate fight or climate change is really real, and it is something that we need to show them the results. And once they see the results, they will begin to see that yes, this is yielding and this is doable. So when you go to where I farm or where my farms are located in Oti region in Ghana, they don't do any bush farming at that places. If those who are in Ghana or those who are in Africa are familiar with bush farms, after the end of the harvest, people will just burn their farms, including the waste, and it is depleting the natural flora, which is not really helping preserve the land and the biodiversity. So after I educated them, that process have stopped, and now we are yielding results from it. So um, this is something I've really went through, but now it is no more because people are rather proud of the process that all the steps that I took. Because those days, I remember when I started, my own mother said that you with a degree and even masters, you said you want to go into agriculture. Why are you going to agriculture? To do what? Then I say, yes, I have a background in medical lab science. I was a medical lab science and I was helping people, analyzing their results, and I saw that no, some of the sicknesses are beyond just the four corners of the lab. You need to produce food or commercial quantities where we can help fight against food insecurity and malnutrition, which led me to start farming, and now we are yielding results and people lives are being changed through the effort that I saw earlier on, and we are working through it.
It's
Thank
it's
you.
such a good story of that show not telling, and a good case of sort of seeing skepticism from both sides. I also love the idea of actually not being afraid to invite funders. Be like, look, if you're skeptical, come and see like what we're doing, and actually
Yeah.
also on the reverse side of it, good on the funders for like leaving their offices and getting down onto the ground as well. So I think there's lessons there from both sides. I'm glancing at the clock and I'm aware we're sort of running out of time. I do just want to ask each of the panelists one final sort of quick fire question before we get onto the Q&A. And I would like to also remind everyone in the session, if you have questions, please do start dropping them into the chat function now, and I will try and get to those in sort of the next 10-15 minutes. But before then, one question for each of the panelists, the same question for everyone, and maybe just if everyone can just give me 2-minute answers, we'll try and keep it quick. The question is, what advice would you give to funders who actively do want to engage with young people to improve their grant making, but they don't know where to start? They're a bit intimidated. They maybe don't have any other young people in the foundation already. Where would you advise that they start? Philip, I might just come straight back to you first, and then we'll go Kelvin and then Andrea to finish. So Philip, what would you say to them?
Let's take the question again.
Yeah, no problem. So what would you say to funders who want to include youth into their programs, maybe even their boards, but they don't know how to start? They don't know how to invite young people to like begin that process, essentially. What advice would you have for engaging?
Yeah. So what the advice I'll give to funders who want to engage the youth is to first of all, you need to research into which youth are credible, or which youthful institutions are credible when it comes to projects or whatever plan that you want to execute. So you can, instead of you going to the field to go and source for people who may not even have credible plans, you may fail. But when you collaborate with people who are already into the process, like Pan-African Network for Climate Action, like PANCA, if you collaborate with Calvin or myself, we'll be able to help you achieve your target or your aim. But if you just go to the field, you may meet the wrong people, which may not help. So collaboration is key, and always try to work with credible institutions that already have track records. If not, your funding will just go in vain, and you will not be able to even recover from the mess that you've created by rushing to the field to go and get people. Though there are credible people also out there, but you need to research instead of rushing to enroll the funding process. And even aside that, you can also do proper screening to know who are credible, who have track record, by way of having interviews, or maybe having spent time to visit their field to be able to assess their capabilities. But if you work with a credible network, you will not even have to spend time visiting others or even do interview. They will be able to do everything ready cooked for you to just rely on it and move forward. Thank you.
Great. Kelvin, over to you. What would you advise? Oh, I think we can't. I don't think you're on mute, but unfortunately, we can't hear you for whatever reason. I'll give you a moment to work it out. Andrea will come straight to you, and then Kelvin will come back to you after.
Yeah, okay. So my advice will be, first of all, make it structural rather than occasional, and please invest beyond financial capital to make it meaningful. Then on the means of that, take enabling conditions seriously. Participation and youth participation is not a nice to have, and please make it with real influence. And finally, remember that philanthropy goes way beyond financial resources. It has a lot of social capital and a lot of influence. And those really mean carry power, and power carries responsibility. And it is very important to shift that power now towards those future generations whose future is indeed to shape and own. Kate, you're muted now. We can't hear you though.
I think he's muted whilst talking.
Okay, we've worked out. I think we're gonna skip by Kelvin. Great. Skip by Kelvin. We'll come back to you. Kelvin, maybe log off, log back on. We'll see if we can like circle back round, and we'll jump straight into the Q&A then. And I actually do have one direct question to start. And again, just to encourage people to drop any questions straight into the chat if you have them, and I'll try and keep an eye on them. But first question to start. And that's someone asking, or they've written, you all come from quite different international contexts, so based out of Africa and Europe, but listening to each other, I wonder which practices you think can be directly translated between contexts and which might struggle. So that's the first question that we have. I don't know if anyone wants to pick that one up. So yeah, what things listening to each other may or may not be transferable, and maybe it completely is, and you think this is a universal youth thing. Andrea, I might come to you first.
Yes, I'd love to. Indeed, I was very somehow happy and somehow very sad that it really resonated very much with me. The vision that was coming from a very different context, even though what Philip and Kelvin were sharing did really resonate with the vision of young people that we have in Europe, that that is around in Europe. And the three main points that Kelvin was sharing at the end of his sharing were actually very much resonating with what we're trying to move also around Europe, with the concept of actually understanding lived experience and the concept of trust and redefining success. I would say that what resonated the most with me was the fact that the expertise idea of that being something that you get from years and not from lived experience. And what Philip was sharing is, now you come and see what I've done and what I can do, is very much what we're hearing from the young people. I interviewed a few of them the last month, and some of them were sharing, you want me to have an experience, then let me have it, and then I will tell you if I want to change something, and now I will do that. So seriously, everything they shared sadly really resonates. And on the other side, the practices that they're bringing are very much enlightening, and I would love to I already reading the article, I was very much surprised about what they shared, and I feel like it's something that we can take back to European countries also, having a vision of being more decentralized in the European philanthropy and learning from good practices that come from a place that you wouldn't be used to looking at, but it might be very interesting to do to learn more creatively and with lived experience indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually just seen Calvin has very kindly dropped his answer to that last question in the chat. So I might just read it out now for the sake of it while he hopefully sorts out the technical issues. So he says, my advice to funders is simple. Start by listening before designing. Young people should not only be consulted after funding priorities have been set, they should be involved from the beginning in identifying challenges, shaping funding strategies, and evaluating impact. Trust youth as partners rather than beneficiaries. Secondly, invest in those relationships, not just projects. Provide flexible long-term funding that really allows youth organizations to innovate, adapt, and build sustainable institutions. Many young leaders have bold ideas, I agree with that, but lack the unrestricted resources needed to grow them. And finally, simplify grant making, which I also agree with. Lengthy applications, rigid reporting requirements, and inaccessible processes often exclude smaller grassroots youth organizations. Meet young people where they are and create spaces for genuine dialogue and co-create those solutions with them. So yeah, I think a lot of people probably resonate with what Kelvin's shared there. And thank you for the questions that are coming in now. I can see we've got another one here from Gaia. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And they have written, what grant-making criteria do you think foundations should adopt to encourage meaningful youth leadership, decision-making power, and participation in funded projects? Which I think maybe Kelvin might have actually answered in some of them, but the second part here is, are there examples of foundations that explicitly assess or reward these dimensions in their funding calls? I wonder if anyone does know of any examples, I guess, of then foundations or grant makers doing this youth engagement well. Maybe Philip, I'm not sure what PAMPCA's donor structure is or funding structure, but have you had positive examples of that relationship that you might be able to share?
So for foundations that are really doing or supporting the youth here in Ghana, we have foundations like McDonald Foundation, where they are grooming youth to take advantage of whatever is around their environment to be able to become better leaders. And they are deliberately grooming entrepreneurs, youth that want to change their society. And there's another one called Amakarin across Ghana, where they are deliberately helping youth and women to be able to become climate resistant, where they are able to solve the issues that relates to climate around their environment by way of planting trees, by way of ensuring educating people, creating awareness to people so that they will not cut trees. Instead of them cutting trees, they should rather be planting trees so that they will not deplete the ozone layer, and also mentoring youth to be able to become champions in climate fight. Then another one too is this social enterprise Ghana, where they are helping the youth to be able to take advantage of their environment, which they are always they give skills to the youth in climate side, so that instead of them to just become burden or to always beg for people, they will give them some stipend to start with whatever that they can do so that they can support themselves instead of begging, or instead of go chasing people for funding. You, like I said, you sow results before you get funding. That's what most people do. So that enterprise or that foundation help you to position themselves before they receive support. And GIZ is also supporting climate fight in Ghana, which is really helping, or by way of giving grants to entrepreneurs. Myself, when I was starting 2 years after, GIZ gave me some support in by way of buying me solar irrigation equipment and some money to start irrigated farming. So these are the practical examples I can give on top of my head. Sorry, it's relating to Ghana. I don't really have other examples elsewhere. Thank you.
That's absolutely fine. And I imagine, like, I feel obviously, Andrea, that you'd probably say Asafaro is a really good example as well. So that might be one to look at. I want to come to the next question though, because I think it's quite a nice one. This one's from Daniel W. And they've just written, what responsibility do foundations have not just to fund youth work, but to actively communicate hope? Andrea, I'll jump to you. I think that's a nice question.
It's a great question, Daniel. Thank you. And indeed, just answering on the other one, Astifera is not doing any grant making, just so we don't have our own criteria. So we're trying to do our best, but we don't do that. So just sharing that. So what responsibility they have? They have a huge responsibility, I would say, and it's very much about what also I feel was part of what Philip was sharing, and is also part of, maybe I'm already jumping in the last question. It is about the young people not in employment, education, or training, which is very much also what we in the rest of Europe, I would say, in Italy, also very much we're concentrating on. And again, is that narrative that we were sharing of need and vulnerability that we're bringing about of young people. But on the other side, we're still focusing very much, and is the attitude that philanthropy has had, at least in Western countries for a long time, to answer to needs and go straight to the top level of the iceberg. But really what we would like to change, and the responsibility they feel philanthropy has, is to go underneath the water and actually look at the root causes of those issues, and most importantly, stop talking just about needs and putting gaps, and talk about desires and dreams. Because again, those young people that are not in employment, education, or training, they're not responding to categories that older people created, but maybe they do have a job that is just a job that it's not in those strict categories that we're compared to, or education is a different way. The same as leadership that is shared by Philip, for example, is a completely different leadership that you would have expected from a person that today is 60 years old. So I would say that to go to those young people and ask them what they would like, what desires do they have, is very much inherently connected to the responsibility of cultivating rather than communicating hope. And moving beyond a vision in which philanthropy is above, and in paternalistic vision is deciding what hope looks like, and asking those who would live that future and would create it now, because we're here already. Some of us are not yet, they are indeed future generation, but some others will hopefully live that future. And we have dreams, might be very different from the ones of the past generations, but I would feel that that is a huge responsibility indeed. And thank you, Daniel, for that great question.
Awesome, thank you, Andrea. I've also just had a message from Kelvin that he is in the call, and I want to try and direct a question to Kelvin, and then maybe give you a moment to type up an answer. Kelvin, hopefully you can hear me. And this one is from Hikaru, who's written, the vast majority of philanthropy is concentrated in the US and the UK, but the majority of young people, as you mentioned, live in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. The question is, Kelvin, how can philanthropies collaborate with local partners and intermediaries to strengthen the effectiveness and sort of equity of global grant making? So I might just see, hopefully, that you're there, and then come on to the next question that we have, which is from Lou Jane, if I'm sort of pronouncing that correctly as well. They've written, in the UK, there's currently a focus both from the government and media on 1 million people not in employment, education, or training. What role does philanthropy have in reducing those numbers? Does it have a role to play? And actually, I think the question here that might be relevant for sort of those outside of a UK context as well is, should young people be leading solutions even though they weren't the ones that created the circumstances or the problems? Philip, maybe this is a nice one for you, actually, if you're up for it. So yeah, especially with climate, should young people be leading climate solutions even though they weren't the ones responsible for the climate crisis?
Yes, so I would say that yes, The reason being that the youth are energetic, and the youth climate issues also affect the youth more. And so if they have a stake or have a say in fighting against climate, they will be able to help solve the problem more than when we leave it to only the adults, which doesn't even really care about the implications of climate. Some of them are compromising on the resources that the future generation will have. But if you, myself, and Andrea, who are still youth, yourself, who are still youth, when we are doing anything, we'll think about tomorrow. So if we deplete today's resources, what will we have tomorrow? What will our children have? What will the next generations after our children even come to meet? So we'll be thinking about that space. But when it is only the youth, some the old folks, some may even think about, oh, how many years am I left to live? So some don't really care about what will happen after they are no more. So when the youth are given the opportunity to help fight against climate change, it will help, because it is we that it affects most. Is the you that it affects most. So when something that affects you and you are left on the fence, or you are not inside it, you will not be able to put in your best, and your views may even be rejected. But when you are inside, whatever that you bring on board or whatever that you suggest will also be put into practice, that will help solve the problem. Thank you.
Andrea, I wonder, do you have anything to kind of add on that one? Should young people, be sort of fixing these problems that they didn't cause?
Yes, I feel like I do really resonate with what Philip was sharing. Like, it really has to do with us, and to keep you outside something that is about you, it's something that is just about in just like the question of intergenerational dialogue is more of a question of intergenerational justice. You wouldn't leave anyone out of a question that concerns them. So it doesn't make sense to leave young people out of questions that do concern them. And so, yeah, I do really resonate with what Philip was saying. And I'm not saying to leave young people in just on questions that you feel they do concern them, but starting from then, please, at least, and then leaving young people talk about the questions that they have a lot of experience on and value that experience. But indeed, it is, I feel, a word that we're using very little in the philanthropic sector is the word of justice. And this is very much about justice.
Yeah.
We can't hear you again, Kate.
Kate, you are muted.
I was just saying, I think actually justice is also a word that scares a lot of people in the philanthropy space. So yeah, absolutely. And with that, I'm looking at the time, and we have sadly run out of it. So we've just reached the end of today's session on youth and philanthropy. I hope you've all learned as much as I have during the session, and please a big thank you to Andrea, Kelvin, Philip. I'm so sad we lost Kelvin, but I hope everyone agrees that his contributions at the beginning were wonderful and really added to the conversation. Kelvin, thank you so much for joining us. I know you can still hear. And an additional big thanks to Jodie and the team, also our partners at Anglo American Foundation, for making today's event possible. And of course, thank you, audience. We value you so much, and thank you for sort of contributing and helping to shape these conversations in the sector. That's all from me. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thanks to the panelists once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Alliance.
Thank you,
Bye.
Kate.